Augmenters. I'm Julie.
And I'm Jimmy.
And we are here to augment your leadership through mentoring. Today, we are joined by Urvashi Bhatnagar, a leader, a mentor, a sponsor, and the author of the Sustainability Scorecard, How to Implement and Profit from Unexpected Solutions.
Today, you will learn how to connect better with others through the relationship of a sponsor. And importantly, Urvashi will tell us how to best ask for someone to become a sponsor. Also, you will grow to your potential by shaking up the game. Before you can break the rules, you must first learn the rules. This entire episode is encompassed by the Augmenters principle of vision. You must see where you want to go before you can go where you want to go. Speaking of going, Julie, let's dive into this episode.
Here we go. Urvashi Bhatnagar, we are so happy to have you on Augmenters today. Welcome. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. We are so excited about this conversation. Urvashi, I can see we have tons of overlap in all different kinds of areas, from healthcare to nutrition to leadership, and of course to mentoring, which is what we're here to talk about today. So one of the ways we love to have our guests introduce themselves is to tell us a little bit about their background and in the context of you having a mentor who saw something in you before you saw it in yourself. So we'd love to hear who that was and what they saw in you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a healthcare person. I have a background in physical therapy and got my doctorate in it. And I was practicing for a while before I went on to my consulting life and so on and so forth. But in terms of mentorship, I would say that I had early sponsors and not mentors. But everything sort of changed when I got my MBA from Yale, and all of a sudden I was surrounded by incredible mentors that I had missed for the first 30 years of my life. So I met incredible people who I regarded as mentors, whether they regarded me as a mentee or not. And someone that actually ended up being a very strong mentor of mine, personally and professionally, but also a sponsor, has been my co-author, Paul Anastas. And that's been quite an unlikely partnership because he's actually an organic chemist by background, and he does a variety of things. He's worked at the EPA, he's led policy change, he's obviously a professor at Yale and investor, and he's just an incredible human being with a multitude of talents. But he ended up being my strongest ally and mentor sponsor since Yale.
Okay, well, let's dive into sponsorship because that is something that comes up here and there on the pod. And it sounds like with that being sort of your first go-to in the conversation, tell us a little bit about what you sort of define sponsoring to be. And also, how did you find sponsors? Because sometimes we have listeners who are very interested in the sponsorship side versus the mentoring.
Yeah. Over the years, it could be a function of the niche that I'm in and that there aren't too many people that specialize in it. So we have a little bit of a community here. I now often get asked how I arrived at this place in my career and how does one navigate their way into this field. And so I often say that I accidentally kind of fell into it. I had intended to do 2-3 other things.
Only 2 or 3? Come on, you're well more competent than that. You could at least do 5 or 7, Urvashi. I have faith.
Yeah, but I had an accidental sponsor early on in my career. I've often talked to people about how I was in physical therapy and I loved healthcare, but I just didn't see myself as a clinical provider ultimately of any sort, whether I went on to get an MD after my DPT or nursing or anything else. I just ultimately realized that one-on-one patient care was not as fulfilling to me as a career at the 50,000 foot level, like where you can really design care and affect change at a broader level. And when I realized that, I oddly enough went to my boss and said, hey, I know I'm working 60 hours a week and sometimes come in on the weekends because I can't finish charting, but I need more work. I'd love to not get paid and do more work because I'd like to gain skill sets in management. And I understand that we have 3 or 4 key priorities as an organization, and they match up, oddly enough, with our 2 or 3 biggest challenges. And I'd like to really spearhead the change on this and be like an operations manager on the ground. And that was really early on in my career. Nobody denied me the ability to do more work without getting paid. It was probably
shocking.
I wonder why.
I know. And there's a really great lesson in there. I've talked to several people now who say, oh my gosh, that's the worst negotiation ever. And yes, of course, women without mentors would put forth such an argument.
Snapping.
Highly qualified, right? Highly qualified, deep expertise women would also very, very much undervalue themselves and say, you know what, no one's going to give me this role for free for X% more. So I should just go ahead and do it and incorporate it as part of my normal standard work. So anyway, that's what I did because I had no mentors. I had a sponsor who was who basically said, yes, I'll be your sponsor because I don't want to pay you more because that's what you're offering me. That's the offer on the table from you. I can't get lower. So
I'll take it. But Urvashi, I have to stop you because I feel like that was a confidence level. Of course, there was both, right? There was the confidence to say, I think I can actually do this and I think I can help you. Of course, there's a flip side of saying I'll do it for free, which basically was like, if I mess up, you're at no loss. Was there somebody, that takes, especially the transition from healthcare provider to management. Was there somebody who saw something in you and taking that leadership role, like earlier on before that really saw like, while you're kind of doing this one job, could see leadership in you, or did that just totally come from you?
I will say that it totally came from me. I just wanted to pursue something else. And that's not to shed a poor light on the organization where I was working and the leadership there, because they're actually phenomenal. But this is the problem that healthcare in general faces, which is burnout at every level. Everyone is so burnt out. And I reported directly to my director at the time. So I was high performing enough to report at like the earliest part of my career to a director who ran like 6 or 7 clinics, but he just did not have the bandwidth to also dive deeply into my like overall professional goals and that kind of thing. He was more concerned with our annual review and our quarterly revenues and that kind of thing, and was most likely burnt out himself. And so with such a high volume clinic. So I really don't begrudge the fact that I didn't really have mentors. This is just so unfortunately very common in healthcare. And I was just one of those people. And so and I didn't honestly, because I knew that was the situation, and this is kind of pervasive within healthcare, and we talk about it so much, we always have. But previously there was no solution for it. Now we have a lot of digital health tools that help solve for burnout and that kind of thing to a degree. But yeah, I sort of didn't even expect my sponsors to advocate for me in any way. But oddly enough, they did. And both ended up writing me really, really great reviews to Yale. And I believe that was one of the really compelling factors that helped my admission. And I didn't expect it. I just gave them sort of a template response to say, hey, if you can incorporate these key things, that would be great, because these are actual metrics that I've met or surpassed, and it's not embellishment in any way. And they went ahead and actually wrote me great reviews. So in my head, being again an overqualified, underconfident woman, I thought, well, this is the biggest payout ever, which arguably it was. But yeah, it was
payout to go to grad school. Oh my god, I can hand you some money. Sweet.
Right. So I had sponsors early on, and then I ended up meeting more mentors, which has been phenomenal. But I've ultimately realized that we do need a combination of both mentorship and sponsorship.
I love it. And I know you weren't trying to make me feel bad on a Friday morning, but I'm currently 0 for 2 on writing recommendations to Yale for the MBA program. So congratulations on the people who recommended you.
Exactly.
I have a feeling you would have done just fine on your own without great recommendations, just by hearing your story about, I want to take on more management. And such a clear thought, and I wrote it down, was one-on-one patient care is not as fulfilling to me. Where did that initially come from? Like, when did that first hit you? Do you remember when you said that to yourself? And were you in a conversation with somebody, or did you reach out to somebody to be like, oh snap, like the apple fell on my head. I got to talk to somebody about it.
Yeah. I mentioned I didn't have any mentors, but like I actually started my career in India, and I was doing global public health and was working specifically with the post-polio and leprosy population. And to me, and I had a phenomenal department head at the time who was called out by Bill Gates for being one of Gates' heroes in 2018. He runs the largest department for post-polio reconstructive surgery in India and Asia. And so it was a phenomenal experience. But what I learned from him was that health equity and social determinants of health and all of this stuff really affects patient outcomes more than one-on-one visits with the doctors. However, all the treatment we see around us, or I saw around me outside of that little bubble, was all one-on-one patient visits, and how the assumption that a medicine will be the cure for everything, or like the solution for everything rather. And so it was this thinking that there is this like vicious cycle here that is not being broken, and I'm just another cog in the wheel. That sort of, I understood that very early on, and it frustrated me, but I understood it more from a systemic level, that this problem is bigger than I am, and I'd love to get involved in a solution in some way throughout my profession. But when I actually entered patient care as a provider, as a fully qualified provider, and I was doing research too at the time, I think I was probably more confronted with the fact that I'm just another provider and I am just adding to more research, yet this research takes 30 years to meet clinical practice in some way. And there's like no robust solution in the market, and I don't hear about people working on this. And it just felt more and more like all we are doing is perpetuating this vicious cycle. And I thought that perhaps I could be part of the solution if I left the system as a one-on-one care provider and entered care design in some way.
Julie, are you feeling the same thing I'm feeling?
Well, I know Jimmy loves physical therapy, so I'm sure he's also standing on little balls as well as having some. I mean, you really touched. Yeah,
they're the best.
Yeah. I mean,
I love it.
He is like your biggest fan already.
Well,
that's
before
what
we get to that, I was going to say, Urvashi, I'm kind of overwhelmed with hope at the moment. Like I usually, when I talk to folks who are in healthcare, it's, the vicious cycle. And then it's like, F plus a bunch of letters afterwards. And you've just described something different and really attacked it head on. Thank you. Honestly, like.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you for having this platform and the work you're doing. I mean, I love the both of your stories, and I believe that we're all, united with the same message, just approaching it from different angles.
Yeah. No, I think it is. And that's what's been just so great, hearing everybody's stories and all the different places that they come from. And to your point, like, I think a real interesting piece of this conversation is that healthcare professional, because there is so much burnout and there is so much like loss of hope, right? And then how are there ways to sort of mentor each other to get in, either to like find the joy in the actual work, whether that is one-on-one patient care or whether that's being part of sort of the broader system. And I would love to talk a little bit about what you said about women and our undervaluing our skills. Do you mentor other women now? And what kind of advice do you have for those kind of women who maybe are in the same position that you found yourself in when you came into that situation, asking to do very valuable work for free?
Absolutely. Yes, I mentor women a lot now. And I have mentored women, especially throughout my career, less so early on because I didn't have as much guidance to offer, but definitely more so now. And a lot of what I hear from women, and it all ties back to negotiation and standing up for yourself in some way and knowing your worth, but it all goes back to, like, we often talk about how to play the game, because when you think about it, nobody tells us that. Like, it's interesting. So when I went to business school, there were so many peers that I had from investment banking or private equity and all of that stuff who often use the phrase playing the game. And oddly enough, they were all men, very successful. By the age of 30, 32, they'd bought a couple horses and a ranch and like all that kind of stuff.
I don't consider that successful.
Good to know. Julie and
that
I
sounds stinky.
Successful.
That sounds stinky and like a lot of work. But yes, I know exactly what you mean.
Yes. Exactly. And they often talked about how the culture in finance and financial services in general had to improve, but they all mentioned that they played the game for a certain amount of time, and this is how you play the game. And I thought, there's a game? I didn't even know there was a game. And does this game exist in different industries and in at different firms? Like how much can we drill down into this? I didn't even know there was a game. And so you could call it career strategy, but the way they described it almost seemed a lot more mission driven and like really, really goal oriented. Like they had their eye on the prize and they said, look, I was on a 2-year tour or I was on a 3-year tour. I did ABC, I achieved certain metrics, and then I went to this other firm and then I did this other thing. And now I can really focus on what I want to do. And I can take, and I've acquired these skill sets so I can pursue impact investing or I can pursue ABC. And I thought, wow, I just didn't realize that you could at the age of 24 just know that this is how you play the game. And so as I have firsthand learned what the game might be in certain
Did you watch The Wire? Was that part of your help?
No, and I constantly get referred The Wire. Need to watch it.
I live in Baltimore, so near you, but different than the DC area, and yeah, it's all about the game.
Yeah, yes, I must say, my brothers, they often tell me that I'm like Leslie Knope from Parks and Rec. I don't know if that's a compliment.
It's coming from your brother.
I'm not sure to do with that, Urvashi, but I appreciate you sharing. I totally cut you off, and you were rolling downhill. But so specifically on the game, when you're in these like mentoring calls, like what's your like what do you do to offer the blue pill to have somebody like open their eyes to it?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is the same thing, right? Like really trying to understand where the person wants to go professionally. And it's the same mentorship process where you're really trying to uncover what really motivates them and what will help them arrive at that goal or like improve their journey in some way. But if, for example, if I'm speaking with someone and they say, hey, I don't ultimately want to be a partner at this consulting firm, I really discovered that I like ABC and I don't know how to translate my experience. Now I know to say, oh, well, okay, so there is such a thing as a 2 to 3 year tour in consulting. You don't have to do this for 20 years and find the one client where you can sell X million of work and then pursue that for a number of years, because that's also temporary. There are ways about this. And we then try to like really tailor their journey such that they get the biggest ROI for their experience while they're there. And I think it takes a little bit of, for the mentee can obviously see themselves as being this individual who can see their line of sight is outside the firm. But for me, it might take me to step outside the goals and mission of the firm and the vertical and the department to say, I value my relationship with you and I think you will be an incredible asset to the economy and wherever you go. And I'm sure you'll be successful. I just want the best for you. So I'll tell you what, I think we should get you on ABC projects at that time. If you want to leave the firm, that's obviously I would welcome that because I want you to pursue your goals. And if we can refer you somewhere, if I can personally refer you somewhere where you can continue your career, or this is how you tailor your resume so that if I don't know anyone or you can find a role somewhere yourself, that's how I've conducted some of those conversations.
My brain is all over the game, and it's like thinking about how there is the element of like, hey, this is what the game is, and this is what the outcome is, versus is there a way to play the game differently? And especially, I think my impression, I have never been a part of the game because I've always been an entrepreneur on the outside. But is it time that we help women kind of create a new game or their own game, or are we not ready for that yet? What do you think?
Oh my gosh. Yes, absolutely. But don't we see that like everywhere? I see now that all of these traditional industries are being disrupted, and they're now the new competitors are startups or Series B, C firms that are doing incredibly well in the space and are really challenging whole businesses within global organizations to reinvent themselves and completely renegotiate their supplier contracts or whatever it might be. So, and I really see women leading the charge, because without mentorship, I assume there were a lot more women entrepreneurs, or women were forced to leave the workplace. Like in consulting, at least I can say there's a cliff, right? When you reach a certain level, ultimately you're just so tired, or you're unable to travel, or you're unable to meet these expectations, and you are not coached out of the firm, but you just realize that there's no promotion for you, there's no increased salary for you. You're just going to stay at this pace and this breakneck pace for like 5 years until life settles down a little bit and your kids grow up. And can you really do that? You're not going to get any time with them. And so there's this huge talent that has been disrupting traditional industries for a while. And I think it has finally thankfully come to the point that global organizations are being disrupted, and women are also climbing more and more into upper management. So yes, the business case is closed, and it's more about breaking those ceilings more and more now, I think.
I think you really put that succinctly, in that, men have been in so many management positions with such a greater percentage for so long. And it's not like things are fucking peachy. Like there's still a lot of room for improvement. So again, You're giving me hope that there's so much room for improvement that can be assisted by this new group of leaders that are finally getting empowered. And as you said, a lot of times, the cliff or the glass ceiling comes into with family, which is so messed up when everybody wants employees and people who they work with who are strong family members. Julie's company, Well Global, is fantastic at incorporating families, especially women that are pregnant or thinking about having a family or have young families, and continuing to empower them. And I've seen it, from my outside perspective, is just how strong of an organization it creates. My question for you, Urvashi, is then how can men, I'm asking selfishly for me, but how can we be better mentors to women who may be quickly approaching this kind of classic glass ceiling, and making sure it's shattered, for the better, of our society?
I think it starts with first, thank you for the question. That's such a big question. And
it starts with
the
question.
Yeah.
It starts with the question.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, the question is the easy part. Talk is cheap.
Not really. No, not everybody asked that question. So yeah.
Yeah.
I
think you're the first male to ask me that question. So thank you. You remind me of a friend of mine who would regularly sign up for like women's symposiums and women's meetups because he wanted to be an ally. And when I asked him why, then he said that it would be such a huge missed opportunity if he didn't, like economically for any firm. And I think that's my response to you, is that I think men in general, and it's not just about men, I think it's about traditional systems that just aren't working, quite simply. And there's such a huge missed opportunity that we would be stupid to leave money on the table if we didn't allow diverse, additional players to enter the game and transform it. We've just been doing, my mentor and co-author says very often that we've been doing things wrong for so long that there's nothing but opportunities. I think that applies here.
Again, you've zoomed out amazingly well from my one-on-one question to your 50,000 foot view of just traditional systems are not working. So it's not necessarily, as I said, about, gender in this question, but there's so much opportunity. And like, this is the whole purpose for DEI and Jedi general, is that traditional systems are not working. Like, how are we not doing a better job of promoting new ideas, new perspectives, new skills into these positions? Because again, things aren't peachy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think this really goes back to sponsorship, right, Urvashi? Because I think that's a lot of what we're talking about, is that idea of that, the people have played the game, whoever they are, they're at the top, they've gotten there, they got their horses, they got their whatever. And then, this group that's coming up, and I'm super optimistic about the future in terms of just gender roles in general. And I think like everything continues to change. How do people who are, it could be women or men, who are in this, they're getting up into there, they've played the game a little bit, they have some thought, they want to get to that next level. How do you recommend they actually ask for a sponsor? Like, what should they look for? What kind of words should they use within the organization? Like, what are the nuts and bolts of how you kind of get that person who's in that next area And this, I am asking really specifically about sponsoring, although I know we talk a lot about mentoring, because it seems like you have a really good perspective on it. Like, how do you ask for that?
Yeah. And is it like a good way to kind of like segment by like type of horse owned, like brindle, or maybe just like, like lighter
Or is it
colored
like
horses in
Ferrari
general?
versus?
Or is it like stables? Do they use pitchforks still, or do they have an automated system?
Or are they actually horse race owner? Like that would be more exciting. That would be pretty cool.
Exactly.
Just horses for the sake of horses seems kind of like whatever.
But if they're a horse race owner, are they really going to be ready to put their own skin in the game to stick their neck out for somebody else?
Good
when
point.
If the horse breaks a leg, they're just going to take it out back and shoot it. So
we are actually just giving you time to think about the answer, Urvashi.
That'd be a red flag.
But I love this because you've described exactly why when you're approaching a sponsor, you need a really tight business case, because you'll have sponsors of every flavor, and sometimes it surprises me. You never know. I mean, some sponsors sometimes could care. They have such strong pressure and such sight on their organizational mission, or they're like really focused on their own legacy, that that they may not have time for mentorship. It's not a bad intention, they just don't have time for it, and they might still be able to do one-to-many mentorship, but oftentimes they're not able to, and that's why they've embraced the role of a sponsor. And so if you're meeting that type of a sponsor, you just need to approach it with sort of like that business development, art of selling kind of mindset, where you're really understanding your audience and what are some of the messages that really resonate with them, and you create a business case around it. And I don't mean to say that you create like a 10-page deck and like sell them on the idea. Maybe that's what they're looking for. Maybe that's what they respond to. And that's like the nuance between knowing your audience. Some people would really prefer that. And some people would prefer a conversation over coffee, but they just really want to get into it. Tell me why I should invest my money here. Tell me why the department needs to focus on this. And you're going to get how many hours of my resources time? Okay, what's going to be the output, and when do you intend to start? And if you can demonstrate your clearly articulated vision, then that's great. And that's the end of the conversation. And as you demonstrate your success, you will get additional sponsorship for that person, and from that person, and hopefully develop a mentorship type of relationship with them as well, because they've realized how valuable your ideas are. But you'll often find sponsors that want to be mentors as well. They somehow make time for it amid all of their pressures and responsibilities and things like that. And in that case, you might want to tailor your message a little bit more and be a little bit more personal about it and say, you know that I'm really passionate about ABC. I have an idea. This is why I think it'll work. But I also want you to be involved from a mentorship standpoint. But I think you'll have so much value to add. And this is exactly where I think I see your value, really demonstrating ROI. And that might resonate with them as well. But I tend to take that approach. I don't know if it's right, but this is what's worked for me.
You can't totally go wrong with a business case, especially obviously in the business context, right? If you're looking for a sponsor within some kind of other way, then, what are you going to say, Jimmy?
I'd be like, have you tried to pitch Heather, my artist wife, with a business case? That goes great. Yeah. But I think that leads to what I was then going to follow up with. Like, I agree with Julie, actually. But what you said, Urvashi, which resonated with me, was approach the sponsor with a whole lot of empathy and listening and discovery before you say something, because you need to know the sponsor's preferred medium of communication. You need to know what words, terms, metrics matter to them. And you said, like, maybe it is the PowerPoint, not to artists. And then maybe it is, something else to another individual, like our horse racing, archetype, get a good YouTube video of Secretariat and like lead with that. And maybe you'll go somewhere. So that really resonated with me. And I didn't think about that quite as much, that with mentors potentially, especially if it's just going to be 1 30-minute call, which is barely a relationship. But if you're really into a sponsor, which is much more intense, if the relationship is going to be greater, you need to do greater investment at the jump to actually get into this relationship in the right way. And I hadn't thought about that before.
You almost need a mentor to get a sponsor.
Yeah, exactly.
You need somebody to really
you need advocates.
Yeah, to
and
help you get your
influencers.
story straight, to be able to really make that case. And I think we're talking very much like I mean, I'm really imagining this in more of a corporate environment, but I guess it's really within any organization I love that. And this is totally new. I don't think we've talked about this at all, which is incredible. After 80 episodes, we haven't talked about this. But yeah, that idea of, when you approach a sponsor, really, really being clear what your ask is and what the value is. It's like a business pitch at the end of the day. Yeah. Approach with the business case. So
it kind of takes me back to I had a business school professor who is just a great friend of mine now, Dalian Kane. So shout out to him because he's awesome. And he teaches negotiation. Yeah, he's incredible. I mean, he has many, many skills besides just being a negotiation professor, and he's incredible. But he often says that in some of the biggest negotiations that we know about in history, the distinguishing factor between a win and a loss is the preparation, what in a corporate setting we would call pre-sales. And the more intense your pre-sale is in really uncovering all of these details, the better your outcome is likely to be. He even, one time I had actually just gone to him just one-on-one for advice on something I was working on. And he said to me, you know what I would do? I would go and sit in your closet so that you're not surrounded by like yelling kids or anything like that. And even practice your intonation and your and how you're delivering a certain message. And I thought, wow, like that blew my mind, that not only did this go beyond your typical, like understanding the audience, the relationship map, understanding who are the detractors and the influencers politically in an organization and getting all of this different buy-in and, all of that stuff, but even going so deep into practicing that delivery so much that you don't have to think about it when you're doing it was astonishing to me. But I must say that it's worked in some of the engagements that I've really, really cared about or really needed to be accomplished. That was the key.
So I shouldn't ask, how much pre-sales do you think we did before this discussion?
Did we sell you, Urvashi?
It wasn't required.
Everything's a negotiation because negotiations are discussion. We learned that from an earlier episode with Susie Tomanchuk about negotiation. I love it. If I can, Urvashi, I want to pivot just a little bit and think about your decision making and how, if you didn't have necessarily mentors, and how, if you didn't necessarily have mentors, can you tell that we're going to do some post-production on this? So how, if you didn't necessarily have mentors that were always around and you had a sponsor who was your accidental sponsor, if somebody had told me that I was going to meet someone who has a doctorate in physical therapy, then got her MBA, and then ended up in really healthcare management for 50,000 foot view, I'd be like, well, that's a unique trail through the woods. That isn't what I would necessarily think to jump out to me. Where did these decision points come from? Do you have like a really strong family member that you were talking to? Did you have an early AI ChatGPT that was your best friend? You bounce it off that? What was your kind of internal dialogue to come to some of these, even just approach the question to yourself?
Well, thank you for the question. It made me really think very deeply about this journey. And I haven't been asked it often or at all, I think. You're right. No one can exist in an island by themselves, and nothing is accomplished alone. And so to that end, I think my husband, or my boyfriend at the time, who is now my husband and all of that, was really the first person to tell me that I need to think more broadly about my career. And that if I wasn't satisfied with something, then I had no right to complain about it if I wasn't actively trying to change it. So I can complain about it if I'm actively trying to change it. So I said, great, this is all the motivation I need to continue complaining. And so that's
okay. So what you're telling me is you decided to give me hope in healthcare because you wanted to complain more. Got it.
Right. We all need to vent and about burnout and everything else. But that said, I think he really got me started on the track. And since then, what I have accidentally done and has helped for the better or has ended up helping has been finding unlikely partnerships. For example, I actually got admission into the healthcare track in my MBA program, and I went to listen to Paul Anastas, my mentors, talk before the program started, and he was talking about sustainability and how sustainability was this broad overarching solution which could be applied to corporate strategy in such a way that it really transforms existing systems and can transform the economy. And he also presented in such a way that the future is coming, and it's coming faster than you think. And if you don't pay attention to it, you are going to be left behind, because some dinosaurs change and some dinosaurs die. And so I listened to that, and I think I was young enough and naive enough that I thought, wow, this $200,000 degree should be applied to sustainability and not what I've been doing for the past 10 years. And so I completely changed tracks, and all of a sudden I was surrounded by peers and advisors and thousands of LinkedIn connections later that are actually not from my profession. And I believe that has really helped today, because I've been able to bring in stakeholders to help not only solve things, but also provide me like personal guidance and their views on how to navigate sometimes political situations and relationships based on what they see in their industry. And that has been, I think, the key factor, because in a way, they don't have a stake in the game. They don't have skin in the game. They're not in healthcare. They're not in my organization. They oftentimes need to be told the difference between value-based care and fee-for-service. So if you know a little bit about that, you know how disconnected they are. Yeah. And so, but they have really robust solutions. Like nothing in this world exists such that it cannot be solved. It can be solved with intellectual curiosity and resources and manpower and things like that. So I think that's been the difference, is that I've been able to bring these outside perspectives not only into my career, but my thinking and mindset. And that's really helped.
Also, shout out to the husbands, because we've had quite a few recent female guests specifically who really found that their partner was one who I think more just believed in them before they believed in themselves. We hadn't heard it specifically with the I don't want to hear you complain anymore. Has come up with something bigger to complain about. But yeah, that is really incredible. I think when you can find a partner, a life partner, as well as business partners who support you on that journey. So that's just a great shout out reminder.
Yes. Well, they all belong to Jimmy's tribe of allies.
Roll with guys like that. They're the best, the absolute best.
I have one more question for you, which is, you've mentioned the term accidental a couple times. Like, you're like, I had an accidental sponsor, and like I kind of accidentally got into sustainability. I've noticed, you have a robust volunteering practice that you do as well. Julie and I are huge advocates of volunteering, and like, when I see somebody who says accidental, and then I see someone who also volunteers a lot, I don't think it's actually accidental. It's a different word. I don't have it at the tip of my tongue right now, but like maybe it's like just your motor, your desire to go out and affect change and just go out and do it. But how could that kind of energy within you not be it can't be accidental? Like you are actively doing things. So like, is there a better word for that for you or something? Like, hey, can you help me understand this accidental word? I don't like it.
Oh my God, thank you. You've caught on to something my very best friends make fun of me for, because
you can do better friends. Come on, you're very welcome.
But I've often been told, like even like earlier on, like when you're applying for your first roles, or like I was exploring consulting at the time, they were like, you can't go in there and sound mission driven. Like, you got to talk about salary, and like nobody goes to the Big Four excited about the mission that they're going to further for their clients who are spending millions of dollars
to friends. I love these people.
Oh my gosh.
They keep it real. And but I think it is really about speaking about your mission in a language that everybody understands, and that language is often monetary. If you can somehow creatively find a way to articulate your vision and mission, that's how you start developing a business case for it. Otherwise, we get back to the same situation where people, whether they are individuals or they are part of nonprofits or the non-market economy, that area of the economy always needs money. For-profit organizations and leaders in for-profit organizations always need a way to place their money in ways that will not only further their organizational mission or their own personal mission, but will demonstrate some ROI or further some goal in a very tangible way. So if we're not all talking in the same language, nothing will work, and we won't be able to affect change for women and the cliff and all of these very important things. So you're right. It's not accidental, perhaps, now that I think about it, but perhaps it's been a journey of trying to articulate my vision in a better way.
So what word other than accidental?
I was thinking guided. You sound a bit guided. You sound guided. Yeah. Like you have sort of an internal guidance that it's not necessarily, it's not, I don't believe in accident. So I think you are guided towards this, depending upon how woo-woo you get, like a sort of chosen journey that you're on, that you keep taking the right actions. And, when you let go of fear and you show up for it, you have a great teams around you, your sponsors, your mentors, your family, all these people cheering you on, then you're able to kind of keep taking these incredible steps on your path, which to Jimmy's earlier point, we're so happy to see you doing, because it is exciting to know, again, that people like you are in these roles and advocating for women, advocating for healthcare, advocating for healthcare professionals. It's super exciting.
So speaking of manifesting, you did to us in your kind of our pre-sales, you said, maybe the title of this episode would be Nutrition at 1.5 Degrees. And I'm literally like, what the hell does that mean? Like,
yeah, that is a really cool, I must say that's a really cool title. But
what does it mean?
Yeah, go get it.
It is.
But no, I think it goes back to how we have traditionally behaved as if, by we, I mean like everybody in the economy has traditionally behaved as if your personal health and wellness and environmental wellness is decoupled from the economy. Whereas that's not true. There's very, very many business cases. The case is closed. And there are numbers behind this. I wrote a book on it. There is much information on this subject. So why do we continue to behave in such a manner that all of this is uncoupled from each other, and only one of the three can be achieved at the same time? It's in fact only our intellectual laziness that allows us to perpetuate this myth and continue to prove the status quo. So I think nutrition absolutely needs to be focused on at the 1.5 degrees. It's going to be a very critical factor, and it goes back to personal health and wellness, which cannot be achieved without environmental wellness. And so extending life on Earth can only be achieved meaningfully if we pay attention to forever chemicals and detoxifying our environment and channeling large amounts of investment money into these critical areas that are going to be missed opportunities if we don't invest in them.
I mean, well said. Damn. I still don't know what 1.5 degrees means. I must be missing something. Like,
I meant with the impact of climate change. So since the Industrial Revolution, there has been an increase in global surface temperature, which is not just, something that is happening to someone else somewhere else very far away, or to the Earth and we are not connected to it and it doesn't affect our economy. None of those statements are true. So I think nutrition and just a multitude of factors needs to be addressed in a more holistic manner.
Urvashi, this was so much fun. I have a very quick thing at the end I like to do with all guests, where I have a quick rapid fire. So just Rorschach's verbal test for these 4 words. When I say the word mentor, what immediately comes to mind?
Paul Anastas.
Paul Anastas, a person. Would love that.
Love it.
How about when I say mentee? You can say Jimmy, but other than Jimmy, when I say mentee,
my son, oddly enough, because isn't that like the most, like I try to regard myself as his guide or teacher, and not kind of try to own the outcome. I mean, he's only 2, so it's easier for me to say that at 2 versus like a 13-year-old.
It's harder to say that at 2. It is harder to say that at 2 because God only knows what 2-year-old outcomes are. That is uncontrollable.
When I say the word sponsor,
organizations.
And lastly, coach.
It makes me instantly think of what was that documentary, the Michael Jordan documentary?
The
And
Last Dance.
yeah, The Last Dance. And it makes me think of Ted Lasso, but really someone that is bringing their whole self and has the capability and the willingness to bring their whole self to your goals and mission, which is such a selfless act.
Phenomenal. Julie, can you wrap this up? Because I don't have the
Yes,
words.
it was one. Okay, Urvashi, thank you so much. Jimmy's speechless, which almost never happens. So I feel super inspired. I loved our conversation. I think you really clarified sponsorship and mentoring for us, which is really helpful. We're really working on like tangible, tangible outcomes for people listening to the podcast. So I think that's a huge takeaway. We're so happy we met you. We really hope to stay in touch, and more to come.
Julie, I don't think we're ever going to own a horse with Urvashi, but wow, that was a fun interview. And I learned so much. We haven't had a discussion about the delicate intricacy between sponsor and mentoring, and how mentoring can be really the jump off for a sponsor relationship.
Yeah. And I think also the reason, for you and I as entrepreneurs, sponsoring is a different kind of thing because we don't have, the organization is small, so you don't need a corporate sponsor to get you where you need to go. But all of our guests that we've interviewed in the corporate environment, and certainly Urvashi, I think really sold me on the concept of being able to get in with a sponsor, being able to show the ROI for what you envision happening, whether that's you moving into a new position, whether that's you advocating for a new initiative, whether it's you, kind of following your passion within the organization, but being able to be really clear on what the benefit is to you, to the sponsor, and to the organization is going to get you there. It was a good blueprint.
I completely agree. And I think it can also be really extrapolated to other relationships. Like even if you go to a friend socially, you're like, hey, let's be friends. You kind of got to prove the ROI. It's like, well, am I going to do something fun with you? Like, are you going to make me laugh? Do we both like the same hobbies? And what's going on here? And if you think about it, it's like, yeah, if your friends don't bring you value, you're probably not going to be hanging out with them. Similarly, like a sponsor, if you just go up to someone and say, hey, will you sponsor me? That is very much a take. There is no give in this. And I think showing that, together, this relationship will be much stronger for both people, not just for you. If you're approaching a relationship and only thinking about the ROI for yourself, no matter what the kind of relationship it is, there's going to be an issue there down the road.
I had never thought of pitching a friend with an ROI. But I guess
I got beers in the fridge.
I was actually just remembering one of our first conversations, how we ended up starting Augmenters, is you were pitching me on putting mentoring into my company's newsletter, which I thought was such a funny pitch that was like, no, you're going to look great. You're going to look great. You should just put it in your newsletter. Talk about mentoring. And I was like, what?
Yeah. Who thinks up that stuff? Wow.
Only you, Jimmy. Only you. And I think her clarity on the benefit of sponsoring, which actually I think really relates to our second point. And the other thing that I really took away from Urvashi and keep thinking about is the idea of, you just got to play the game, right? Like, that's so fascinating that there is this game out there, especially in a corporate environment, especially what she's talking about through either finance or through any company, right? Like you got to play the game and you're going to get what you're supposed to get. Two things. One, can you actually shake up that game? And if you are going to play the game, you're going to need a sponsor to help you get in there. And how do you communicate your value to being part of this? And then when you're up there in the middle of the game, can you shake it up?
Sometimes I get worried when people say I want to shake up the game, because I think that they believe they have a delusion of grandeur to suddenly be able to just come in and be a bull in a china shop. And there might be a way to shake up the game, but you're going to ruin a lot of relationships along the way. And the area under the curve may actually not be beneficial to the overall community. And when I say that, I mean, you might not feel good at the end if you come into a location or a business or a community and not first understand how things occur now. It doesn't have to take a long time, but it shows that you care enough about the people already there that you want to learn how they've been operating before you start being the bull in the china shop. So knowing that the game is usually taught to you by someone who's there, like a sponsor, is a really powerful entry or is a really powerful model to think about entering a new organization, a new culture, a new community, that you really want someone to be your guide when you first get there. And why not have it be a sponsor? Because as Urvashi said, what was the quote, Julie, you like so much? The quote I was looking for is that a mentoring relationship is about listening, yet a sponsoring relationship is about going somewhere together. And that to me was really powerful. And that to go somewhere together, there's this great line in the Navy SEALs, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think that can come together with sponsor as well, and how powerful that relationship can be. But if you're going to go far together, you're going to first know how the game is played and then bend those rules to work best for you.
I have so many thoughts and I won't get into all of them, and this actually I think is where allyship really comes into play, because I think that idea of helping others into the organization in a way that's authentic to them and able to make change is a really great role for sponsor, and why we see conversations of sponsorship so much around DE&I and allyship as well. So to really help with that. And then, I think there is an element of, when Urvashi was talking about it, to me, it was very much like a bro finance kind of world she was talking about, right? Like the Yale MBA program, these guys who are 20, 30, whatever, 30 something guys. I mean, come on, whatever. And they are, there's this game, you just have to play the game. So I think that there's an element of being able to bring new people into the game and how they're going to continue to shake it up, which is, I think, a lot of what we've been talking about all this time as well.
And shaking up what is occurring now is not a bad thing for people who are currently in the game. I think it's pretty clear that traditional systems are not making people happy in general, wherever you are. Traditional systems are not working. So the breaking the rules needs to happen, and it's going to happen better and faster with a longer lasting impact if you break those rules with somebody as your sponsor, or with you sponsoring somebody else, to really be able to get further together.
Definitely. I'm excited for the fact that Urvashi is bringing people along, and then she's part of these systems and thinking so broadly about so many different topics, from DE&I to sustainability, et cetera, which just feels like vision. She's got great vision. I mean, how jazzed were you after this interview? I was like, this is one of the most exciting shows. This is why we want to do the podcast, because I was like, I gotta go get a job. I need to go find a sponsor. She could sponsor you. There you go. I did love the PT thing, though, because it does make me laugh. Anytime anybody talks about PT, I always think of you as one of the world's largest PT fans I've ever met.
I am a physical therapy stand. Literally, I'm standing because of physical therapy.
That's a good plug. But it was a great episode. It was so much fun. I'm excited to see where she goes. And I am excited to hear from listeners about sponsorship, if they found that this episode was helpful, if it gave them some tips on how to navigate and play the game their own way. Physical therapy joke. You don't want to break the rules of your piriformis before you first learn how to take care of your piriformis. Amen. Augmenters out. Augmenters out. Wow, you've made it this far, and we thank you. Hopefully you enjoyed our episode and discovered new ways to bring more authentic connection into your mentoring relationships. Want to tell them more, Jimmy? Be an augmenter with us. Visit our website for the best interactive mentoring content at augmenters.us. Share our podcast with someone you care about. Like and subscribe. And yes, really, you following our show and writing a review, it's a big deal. Your actions provide us with the resources to continue our undefeated, unencumbered, prize-winning productions. We welcome questions and suggestions via email hi@augmenters.us or on social with our handle @AugmentersHQ. We are most active and available on LinkedIn and YouTube. Shout out and earnest thank you to our intrepid producer, Erlin Cato. We appreciate you. Augmenters out. See ya.